Imagine a world where the cure for cancer exists, but no one brings it to market. It's not a dystopian nightmare. It's a chilling economic reality. Because in the world of modern pharmaceuticals, a cured patient is a lost customer. And somewhere in between the life or death stakes of human illness lies a simple, brutal calculus. Recurring treatment is more profitable than a permanent solution. This video peels back the glossy surface of Big Pharma to explore a truth that many suspect but few understand. Why the very structure of our healthcare economy actively discourages cures. Why breakthrough drugs vanish, why innovation stalls, why even in an age of gene editing and medical miracles, we keep taking pills instead of getting better. Because this isn't a conspiracy theory, it's a consequence of economic design, a system wired for profit, not public health. When drug companies answer to shareholders instead of patients, healing becomes a secondary objective. And as drug prices rise and life expectancies falter, the rest of the world pays the cost. Let's start with a success story that turned into a cautionary tale. Sovaldi, a drug that cured hepatitis C in 90% of patients. Approved in 2013, it was hailed as a revolution, one of the first true cures for a chronic viral infection. Gilead Sciences, the company behind it, priced the drug at $84,000 per treatment course. Outrage followed. Politicians protested. But here's what few noticed. Within just a few years, sales collapsed. Not because the drug failed, but because it worked. Millions were cured. The market vanished. The drug's success created a vacuum where a revenue stream used to be. Gilead's hepatitis C division went from $19 billion in annual revenue in 2015 to under $4 billion just 5 years later. And that, in pharma terms, is considered a mistake. The Gilead case isn't isolated. It reveals a structural disincentive. Cures kill markets. And in a $1.5 trillion global pharmaceutical industry, market death is one disease no company wants to catch. Instead, companies focus on chronic treatments. Think insulin for diabetes, statins for cholesterol, or antidepressants for mental health. Drugs designed not to eliminate the disease, but to keep it manageable indefinitely. But how did we get here? What kind of system rewards the endless management of illness over its elimination? In the next section, we'll dive into the economic machinery, patience, pricing power, and the financial engineering that reshaped medicine into a subscription service. To understand why curing diseases has become economically irrational, we need to step inside the boardrooms, not the labs. Because the direction of modern medicine isn't decided by doctors in white coats. It's decided by executives in suits, poring over spreadsheets, optimizing for quarterly returns. Pharmaceutical companies aren't charities. They're publicly tracked corporations, legally obligated to maximize shareholder value. That simple obligation has enormous consequences. It means that every research decision, every drug pricing model, and every Priceline investment is judged by one measure: future cash flow. And in that framework, chronic illness is king. Take type 2 diabetes, for example. It affects over 400 million people globally and is largely managed with daily medications like metformin or insulin, not cured. These drugs generate tens of billions of dollars in annual revenue. In 2022 alone, Novo Nordisk reported nearly $25 billion in sales, largely from diabetes care. A cure? That would be a financial catastrophe for them. Curing a disease means selling one high-priced treatment, maybe once in a lifetime. But treating a disease means selling a moderately priced drug every month, every year, for life. The math is simple. It's the difference between a $100,000 windfall and a $1 million revenue stream spread across decades. And here's the twist. Pharmaceutical giants are not primarily R&D engines. In 2022, the top 10 pharmaceutical companies spent more on marketing and lobbying than they did on research and development. Pfizer, for instance, spent $12 billion on marketing and administration, compared to just $10.8 billion on R&D. Johnson & Johnson, nearly $9 billion on marketing, $14.6 billion on R&D, but over $71 billion in total revenue. And much of that comes from incremental innovation, not breakthrough cures. Meanwhile, the industry's lobbying arm, Pharma, is among the most powerful in Washington, consistently outspending defense contractors and oil giants. Why? To protect exclusivity, delay generic competition, and ensure favorable patent laws. In the US, a patent lasts 20 years, but drug companies often file tweaks to formulations or delivery methods to extend protection. This tactic, called evergreening, keeps cheaper alternatives off the market and patients locked into costly treatments. In 2021, a group of researchers identified over 100 drugs in the US with extended patents, some for as long as 40 years, not because the drugs had changed meaningfully, but because changing the pill's shape, delivery mechanism, or even the color was enough to reset the clock. So what happens when life-saving cures do emerge? In the next section, we'll look at what happens to innovation when it collides with profit, because even when a cure is possible, the road to approval is littered with invisible roadblocks and sometimes deliberate sabotage. You'd think that the discovery of a medical cure would be celebrated, fast-tracked, and funded. But in a world where a sick patient is a revenue stream, innovation that threatens to eliminate demand is quietly sidelined. Sometimes it's not science that kills a cure, it's the business model. In 2012, a small biotech firm made headlines with a promising therapy for Duchenne muscular dystrophy, a deadly genetic disorder primarily affecting boys. Early trials showed immense potential, but the treatment wasn't owned by a major pharmaceutical company. It was developed by a startup, relying on limited funding and government grants. As soon as larger competitors took notice, things changed. The company was bought out, its pipeline shelved, and the treatment never reached the market. Officially, the new owner cited insufficient commercial viability, but insiders described something more chilling: a cure too effective to be profitable. This isn't an isolated event. Thousands of promising compounds never make it past preclinical trials, not because they fail, but because they don't promise repeat revenue. The FDA requires extensive trials that can cost over $1 billion. Companies won't invest unless the payoff is recurring and substantial. This is why Me Too drugs, nearly identical versions of existing medications, flood the market. They're cheaper to develop, easier to patent, and safer bets for return on investment. A 2020 report from the World Health Organization estimated that over 70% of new drugs provide no significant benefit over existing treatments. They're just new ways to sell the same solutions. Even in the realm of cutting-edge medicine, where gene editing tools like CRISPR promise to erase genetic diseases at the source, the incentives get murky. Take the case of Zolgensma, a gene therapy for spinal muscular atrophy. A single dose can potentially save a child's life, but the price? $2.1 million, making it the most expensive drug in the world. The reasoning? Since it's a one-time cure, the company must extract all future profits up front. High prices mean limited access. Insurance companies stall. Hospitals avoid stockpiling it. Families launch GoFundMe campaigns to save their kids' lives. A cure exists, but only if you can afford to pay the price of a house for a single injection. In 2023, Bluebird Bio pulled 2 life-saving gene therapies from the European market, citing unsustainable profits. They were too expensive to be widely adopted, yet too cheap to recoup costs quickly. The drugs were effective, they just didn't fit the business model. So what does this say about the future of medicine? In the next section, we explore how the pharmaceutical industry is pivoting from cures to something far more lucrative: subscriptions. When medicine becomes a monthly bill, the patient is no longer a beneficiary, they're a revenue stream. Imagine a world where your life depends on a subscription fee, not unlike Netflix or Spotify. Only this one keeps your body functioning. Welcome to the next frontier in pharmaceuticals, the subscription model for medicine, and it's already here. In 2019, the state of Louisiana signed an unusual deal with Gilead Sciences. Rather than pay per pill for hepatitis C treatment, they negotiated a subscription, a flat fee for unlimited access to the drug for Medicaid patients and the incarcerated. The state called it the Netflix model. Gilead got guaranteed revenue. Louisiana got cost predictability. On paper, it worked. But this was the exception. The real subscription revolution is happening behind closed doors, not in state contracts, but in strategic pipelines. Pharma companies are now building product lines around lifelong therapies. These aren't cures, they're controlled dependencies. Consider statins, drugs for high cholesterol. They're the most prescribed medications in the US, used by over 90 million people. But some newer drugs, like PCSK9 inhibitors, offered superior performance. At launch, they were priced at $14,000 per year. After public backlash, that dropped to $5,850, still far higher than genetics. Why not cure the underlying lipid disorder through gene editing or dietary protocols? Because maintaining the condition ensures recurring revenue. According to Goldman Sachs, curing patients poses a risk to long-term cash flow. In a leaked 2018 report, analysts explicitly asked, "Is curing patients a sustainable business model?" The conclusion was no. Mental health is another fertile ground. SSRIs and other antidepressants, ADHD medications, and antipsychotics are rarely marketed as curative. They're maintenance tools offered for life. In 2024, mental health prescriptions hit an all-time high in the US, with over 76 million Americans refilling some form of psychiatric medication. And now, tech is entering the fray. Biotech startups backed by venture capital are creating digital therapies with monthly licensing fees. Combined with wearables and biometric monitoring, the new model for healthcare is perpetual engagement, not healing, but ongoing optimization. The shift is clear. Medicine is no longer a product you buy once to solve a problem. It's a service you rent for the privilege of staying alive. And the companies building this system aren't hiding it. They're structuring their entire business models around patient retention, not recovery. But what happens when this system fails? When people can't pay? When innovation stalls? Or when public trust collapses? In our final section, we'll explore the broader consequences, economic inequality, lost innovation, and the dangerous question no one wants to ask: what if curing people simply isn't part of the plan anymore? In a world where cures threaten profits and treatment ensures cash flow, the consequences stretch far beyond the balance sheets. The failure to pursue permanent solutions doesn't just cost lives, it reshapes societies. And it raises a harrowing possibility. What if our health systems were never designed to make us healthy? Across the globe, preventable and manageable diseases continue to drain national economies. The World Health Organization estimates that non-communicable diseases, largely chronic and treatment-reliant, cost the global economy over $2 trillion annually in lost productivity and healthcare expenses. Meanwhile, pharmaceutical giants post record profits. Pfizer's revenue in 2023 exceeded $85 billion. Merck, Sanofi, and Johnson & Johnson followed closely. But innovation measured by new, truly curative therapies has not kept pace. Many pipelines are filled with drugs that are slight modifications of existing ones, known internally as incremental innovations, that extend patent life but rarely improve outcomes. When investment chases profit rather than impact, entire fields are neglected. Antibiotic resistance is rising rapidly, but the pipeline for new antibiotics remains nearly dry. Why? Because antibiotics, taken briefly and infrequently, are bad business. One-time use, low-price, life-saving drugs don't attract capital. So bacteria evolve, resistance spreads, and the world edges toward a post-antibiotic era. The same logic applies to neglected tropical diseases, rare genetic conditions, and anything affecting lower-income populations. The market signals are clear. If a disease affects people without money, it may never get a drug at all. This dissonance breeds distrust. A 2024 Pew survey found that only 39% of Americans believe pharmaceutical companies generally act in the public interest, down from 58% a decade earlier. Globally, skepticism is rising. The COVID-19 pandemic accelerated this, as vaccine rollout delays, intellectual property fights, and stark inequalities exposed the profit-first mindset behind public health promises. The pharmaceutical industry, as it stands, is not built to cure, it's built to capitalize. And while the science of healing has never been more advanced, the business of healing has never been more compromised. We have the tools to end countless diseases, but those tools are locked in vaults, sidelined in strategy decks, or priced out of reach. Not because they don't work, but because they work too well. So next time you wonder why the cure for your condition doesn't exist, ask yourself this: is it because we can't, or because someone decided it's better if you just keep coming back?